I spent $52,000 on concrete and steel just to watch her life fall apart. And honestly, standing here now, listening to the quiet hum of a Texas evening instead of the whine of her German SUV, I can tell you it was worth every single red cent. She thought, because she drove a white BMW X5 and ran the new HOA next door, she owned my land. She was about to learn that in this part of Texas, the deed is king, and my family's deed was written in 1940. It all started the way these things usually do, with a quiet peace being shattered by the march of so-called progress. My ranch, the Riverside Ranch, ain't some sprawling empire you see on television. It's 50 acres of prime pasture land hugging a bend in the Willow Creek, land my great-granddaddy bought with every dollar he had after the Great Depression. We'd run a small, respectable herd of Angus cattle on it for 4 generations. It wasn't a hobby. It was our lifeblood. The money we made from selling a few prize bulls every year, that was college funds and new transmissions and fixing the roof after a hailstorm. That land, with its gnarled oaks and dusty access road, was more a part of me than my own skin. The road itself was just a dirt and gravel track, cut by my grandfather's tractor leading from the county blacktop, across my property, and ending at my house and barns. It was our driveway, plain and simple. The problem began when a developer from Austin bought the 100-acre parcel of scrubland adjacent to my eastern fence line. For a year, the air was filled with the groan of bulldozers and the pop of nail guns. They scraped that land bare, leveled it flat, and started putting up these massive, beige houses that all looked like they were designed by someone who'd only ever seen a house in a computer program. They called it the Estates at Willow Creek, a name that was an insult to both the estates and the creek. My wife, Sarah, a high school science teacher over in the next town, would just shake her head every time we drove past the grand, ridiculous entrance they built. It had a big stone sign and a fountain that wasn't even hooked up to water yet. Then the people started moving in. City folks, mostly, chasing some dream of country living without any of the sweat or sense that goes with it. And with them came the Homeowners Association, the HOA, 3 letters that can make a landowner's blood run cold. And the queen bee of this whole hive, the president of the HOA and the lead real estate agent for the development, was a woman named Karen Bradshaw. I swear she must have been born in a boardroom because she didn't walk. She strategized. She had that helmet of blonde hair that doesn't move in the wind and a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. And she drove that white BMW like it was a chariot and she was Boudica. Only her enemies were speed limits and common courtesy. Our first real interaction happened about a month after she moved into the biggest beige box on the hill. I was out checking the fence line, making sure no new calves had found a way to slip through. I saw the cloud of dust first, moving way too fast down my private road. Then the white SUV came into view, kicking up gravel that pinged off my stock trailer. I stood there, took off my hat, and waited. The BMW slid to a stop a few feet from me, the electric window humming down. "Can I help you?" I asked, polite as Sunday school. Karen Bradshaw peered at me over a pair of sunglasses big enough to be dinner plates. "Oh, you startled me," she said. Though she didn't sound startled at all. She sounded annoyed, like I was a piece of lawn furniture that had been moved out of place. "I'm just cutting through. The main entrance to the estates is such a roundabout nightmare, you know. This road is a lifesaver." I put my hat back on slowly. "Ma'am, I appreciate that, but this isn't a cut-through. This is the private driveway for my ranch." I pointed to the faded but still legible sign hammered into a post, right where the road met the county blacktop. It said, "Riverside Ranch, private property, no outlet." She gave a little laugh, a tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, bless your heart," she said. "And if you're not from around here, that's Texan for you're an idiot." And she continued, "That sign is so old, I'm sure it's just a formality. This is a community road now. It's all about connectivity, you know? Integrated access." She was using those corporate buzzwords that mean absolutely nothing. My politeness was starting to fray around the edges. "Ma'am, with all due respect, it's not a community road. It's my road, on my land. The deed and the survey are filed down at the county courthouse. It's been that way since 1940. She waved a dismissive hand, adorned with a diamond that caught the sun and tried to blind me. We'll have our lawyers look at the plat maps. I'm sure it's a designated easement. It has to be. Anyway, I'm in a dreadful hurry. Pre-closing walkthrough. The window hummed back up, and before I could say another word, she gunned the engine and sped off toward my house, then veered onto the rough track that connected to the back of her development, a track that didn't exist until they started building. They had cleared a path right up to my fence line, clearly intending to punch through. I just stood there, tasting dust and disbelief. My granddaddy would have had a conniption. I just had a slow-burning fire starting in my gut. For the next few weeks, it was a constant battle. I saw her tracks almost daily. Other cars, too. People in shiny sedans and SUVs, clearly residents of the estates following her lead. I was patient, Lord, I was patient. I was raised to believe you talk things out first. I called her. I used the number on the big for sale sign at the entrance to her kingdom of beige. Karen Bradshaw, the voice chirped, all business. Ma'am, this is Clay Mercer from the Riverside Ranch again. We spoke the other day about my private road. The immediate frostiness in her voice was palpable. Yes? I need to ask you and your neighbors to stop using my road. It's tearing it up, and more importantly, it's a liability. I have livestock and heavy equipment moving through here. It's not safe. Mr. Mercer, she said, her voice dripping with condescension, as I explained, we are operating under the assumption that it is a community easement. It provides essential access for my residents and for prospective buyers. It's a value add. Until my lawyer tells me otherwise, we will continue to utilize this pathway. You can't just hoard a road for yourself. This is 21st century living, not some old-timey Western. I took a deep breath. Ma'am, there is no assumption to operate under. There are property lines and deeds. They're not suggestions. I'm asking you one last time, nicely. Please stop. I'll take your request under advisement, she said, which was her corporate speak for go to hell. Then she hung up. That was when I knew talking was over. The next Saturday, I went to the hardware store and bought the heaviest chain they sold and a big, ugly-looking padlock. I drove down to the entrance of my road, wrapped the chain around the two sturdy gate posts that had been there for 50 years, and locked it up tight. I hammered a brand new, professionally printed sign right next to the old one. This one was reflective metal, sharp black letters on a white background. Private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Tarrant County Penal Code 30.05. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Let her lawyer figure that out. The peace lasted exactly 2 days. On Monday morning, I drove my truck down to the gate to get the mail. The chain was on the ground, cut clean through by a pair of bolt cutters. The padlock was gone, and there in the dust were the unmistakable, arrogant tracks of her BMW X5. She hadn't just trespassed. She had committed felony destruction of property. The fire in my gut flared into a blaze. This wasn't about a shortcut anymore. This was a declaration of war. The incident that pushed everything over the edge, the one that turned my slow-burning anger into a cold, hard resolve, happened about a week later. It was calving season, a tense but hopeful time for any rancher. We were expecting a good crop of calves, including one from my best heifer, a beautiful 3-year-old Angus I called Daisy. She was a gentle giant, calm and steady, and she was carrying a calf sired by a prize-winning bull. That calf represented a significant portion of my income for the year, potentially a $15,000 payday if it was a bull with the right genetics. I was moving a small group of pregnant heifers, including Daisy, from the north pasture to the one closer to the barn where I could keep a better eye on them. It's a slow process. You don't rush pregnant animals. We were crossing my private road, the same one Karen Bradshaw had claimed as her own personal highway. I was on foot, just guiding them, gently talking to them in a low voice. They were calm, moving at their own pace. That's when I heard it, the high-pitched whine of an engine at full throttle. Her white BMW came flying over the little rise in the road, doing at least 50. She saw the cows and me, and instead of slowing down, she laid on the horn. A long, blaring, obnoxious shriek that split the afternoon air. It was the worst possible thing she could have done. The cattle panicked. Years of calm breeding went out the window in a split second of pure terror. They scattered, eyes wide, crashing into each other, trying to get away from the noise and the white monster bearing down on them. I screamed at her, a raw, furious sound torn from my throat, but she couldn't hear me over her own horn. Daisy, heavy and ungainly in her final weeks of pregnancy, tried to turn too fast. Her legs went out from under her, and she went down hard, a terrible, gut-wrenching sight. She let out a pained bellow as another terrified cow scrambled over her back. Karen finally slammed on her brakes, her car skidding to a stop in a cloud of dust just feet from the chaos. The window rolled down, and before I could even check on my animal, she started screaming. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash. I have clients with me. What is wrong with you?" I didn't even look at her. All my focus was on Daisy. I ran to her, trying to calm her down, checking her legs. The other heifers were still spooked, running along the fence line. It took me a few minutes to get Daisy back on her feet. She was trembling, favoring her right foreleg, and I could see a deep scrape along her flank where the other cow had kicked her. My heart was pounding with a mixture of fear for my animal and a rage so pure and cold it felt like ice in my veins. I got Daisy moving slowly toward the barn, then I turned to face Karen Bradshaw. Her clients, a nervous-looking couple in clothes far too clean for the country, were staring out the window, looking horrified. I walked slowly, deliberately, to her driver's side door. I was covered in dust and sweat, and I'm sure my face was a mask of fury. I leaned down, my hands gripping the edge of her open window. I spoke in a low voice, a voice that was far more dangerous than shouting. "You ever, and I mean ever, do something like that again, it will be the last thing you do on this property. This is my land. These are my animals. This is your final warning. No more." She was taken aback for a second. The screeching indignation wiped from her face, replaced by a flicker of genuine fear. She saw something in my eyes she wasn't used to seeing, but her arrogance was a terminal disease. She recovered quickly. "How dare you threaten me? This is a public road. I will have you arrested for assault. I'm calling my lawyer." "You do that," I said, my voice flat. "Tell him to meet you in court after I file charges for animal cruelty, reckless endangerment, and destruction of property. I've got your cut chain in my barn. Now get off my land before I have you towed off of it." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. The clients in the back seat were whispering frantically. Finally, with one last venomous glare, she rolled up her window, threw the car in reverse, and tore back down the road, leaving me in another cloud of her dust. I didn't care. I had to get the vet out to check on Daisy. The vet confirmed my fears. The fall had stressed her badly. She was starting premature labor. It was going to be a long, dangerous night, with a high chance of losing both the calf and the mother. My potential $15,000 payday had just turned into a potential $5,000 vet bill, all because of her entitlement and a car horn. That night, as I sat in the barn with my prize heifer, listening to her pained breathing, I made a decision. Karen Bradshaw wanted a war. She was about to get one she could never win. The next phase of her assault was more insidious. She couldn't get through my gate. I'd replaced the cut chain with a case-hardened logging chain that would laugh at bolt cutters. So she started a war of paper and bureaucracy. About a week after the incident with Daisy, an SUV from the county animal control office rolled up to my gate. The officer, a guy named Dale I'd known for years, looked embarrassed. "Clay," he said, tipping his hat, "got a call. Anonymous complaint. Said you were mistreating your animals, starving them, leaving them in unsanitary conditions." I just shook my head and unlocked the gate for him. "Well, Dale, come on in and see the 5-star resort I'm running here. The girls get fresh hay twice a day and all the clean water they can drink." He spent 20 minutes walking the pastures with me. He saw the healthy, glossy coats on my Angus, the clean water troughs, the automated feeders in the barn. He saw Daisy, who by some miracle in the vet's skill had managed to pull through and deliver a small but healthy female calf. We'd lost the potential for a prize bull, but the mother and baby were alive. I explained what had happened, how the calf came early because of the stress from Karen's stunt. Dale's face hardened. I figured as much. He said, writing, "No violation, unfounded complaint," in big letters on his clipboard. This has her fingerprints all over it. We've been getting calls about unleashed dogs and unsafe structures from that new development ever since they broke ground. All of them bogus. Don't worry, Clay. I'll make a note of this in the file. It's harassment. I thanked him, but the visit left a sour taste in my mouth. It was a nuisance, a waste of my time and the county's resources. But Karen was just getting started. 2 weeks later, two very serious-looking people in polo shirts with EPA embroidered on them were at my gate. This wasn't Dale from Animal Control. These were federal agents. The complaint was about agricultural runoff. An anonymous tipster, I could practically hear Karen's screeching voice dictating the words, claimed my cattle operation was contaminating Willow Creek, the very same creek her stupid development was named after. The accusation was that manure was washing directly into the waterway, creating a massive health hazard. This was a serious charge, one that could shut me down and levy fines that would cripple me. For the next 4 hours, I had to walk these agents through every inch of my waste management system. I had to show them the containment berms my granddaddy and I had built years ago, designed specifically to prevent runoff. I had to show them the records from the soil and water tests I voluntarily conduct every 2 years, proving my land wasn't leaching nitrates into the groundwater. I had to explain how we compost our manure and sell it to local gardeners, turning a waste product into a revenue stream. It was a humiliating, invasive, and stressful process. My wife Sarah came home from school and found me sitting with the agents at our kitchen table, papers spread out everywhere. The look on her face was a mixture of fear and fury. Finally, the lead agent, a woman who looked like she'd seen it all, closed her binder. "Mr. Mercer, your operation is one of the cleanest and most compliant I've seen in this region," she said, her tone professional but with a hint of sympathy. "Your containment systems exceed state and federal requirements. This complaint is, to be blunt, garbage." After they left, Sarah put her hand on my shoulder. She'd been quiet through the whole thing, just watching, her jaw tight. "She's trying to break you, Clay," she said softly. "She's trying to bury you in paperwork and fines, so you'll just give up and give her the road." She paused. Then her eyes met mine, hard and clear. "You're planning something, aren't you? Something big." It wasn't a question. I just nodded. A slow smile spread across her face. "Good." The final piece of the puzzle I needed fell into my lap thanks to Eddie, the mailman. Eddie had been delivering mail on this route since before I had a driver's license. He was a wiry man with a sun-beaten face and a deep-seated distrust of anyone who built a house without digging the foundation themselves. He'd seen the whole conflict unfold, from Karen's first shortcut to the parade of county and federal vehicles. One afternoon, he pulled his little mail truck up to my box at the end of the real driveway, the one I had to use now that the main gate was chained. Instead of just dropping the mail, he got out and walked over to my fence. "Clay," he said, leaning over the top wire. He looked around conspiratorially, even though we were the only two souls for half a mile. "You ain't going to believe the junk mail this Bradshaw woman is sending out." "What now, Eddie?" I asked, bracing myself. He reached into his bag and pulled out a glossy, oversized postcard. The front had a picture of one of the beige monstrosities, with a happy, smiling family that looked like they were made of plastic. The headline read, "Live the exclusive ranch lifestyle at the estates at Willow Creek." I flipped it over, and there it was, in black and white, under a list of bullet-pointed community amenities. Right between gourmet kitchens and resort-style pool, coming soon. It read, "Exclusive, private ranch road access for a quick route to town." Eddie tapped the postcard with his finger. "She's promising them access," he whispered, as if the words themselves were a crime. "She's selling your road as a premium amenity. I heard from the fellows over at the title company that she's even putting it in the sales contracts. Some clause about guaranteed access via the Mercer easement. Thing is, they told me they can't find any such easement on the books." That was it. That was the moment everything crystallized. It wasn't just arrogance or entitlement anymore. It was fraud. Felony grade, wire and mail fraud. She wasn't just trespassing. She was building her entire financial house of cards on a foundation of my private property. She was desperate. The rumors were she'd sunk everything into this development, that a nasty divorce had left her drowning in debt. These sales were her only way out. If she couldn't deliver that exclusive access, her contracts would be void. She'd be open to lawsuits from every single person she'd sold a house to. That's when I knew I had her. She hadn't just given me a reason to fight back. She'd given me the weapon to do it. Just as I was absorbing the depth of her deception, the final act of her paper war arrived. A beat-up sedan I didn't recognize pulled up. A nervous-looking man in a cheap suit got out and walked hesitantly to my gate. He called my name. When I walked down, he cleared his throat and served me with a lawsuit. Karen Bradshaw was suing me. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. She was suing me for blocking a public right-of-way, for interfering with commerce, and for devaluing her property by locking my own gate. The lawsuit demanded I immediately remove the chain and pay her damages for the inconvenience. I took the papers from the process server and actually laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound. This was the move of a cornered animal, a desperate gambler going all in on a terrible hand. She was trying to use the courts to legitimize her lie. She was betting I'd flinch, that I'd be scared of the legal feats and just give in. She had no idea who she was dealing with. The lawsuit was the best thing that could have happened. It opened the door to legal discovery. It meant I could now, officially, through the courts, demand her sales contracts, her correspondence with buyers, the plat maps she submitted to the county. But I didn't even need to wait for that. I decided to do my own homework first. I told Sarah I'd be gone for a few days. I drove my old pickup truck into town and parked it at the Tarrant County Administration Building. I walked into the county clerk's office, a place that smells of old paper and dust, a place where the truth is filed away in heavy, leather-bound books and on rolls of microfilm. I started with my own property. I asked the clerk, a kindly woman with a beehive hairdo named Marlene, to pull the deed for Riverside Ranch, Deed Book 42, page 118. She brought out the massive, ancient volume. There it was, in flowing, cursive script from 1940, the legal description of my 50 acres. I traced the boundaries with my finger. Then I pulled the original survey map, a beautiful, hand-drawn document. My road was on it, clearly marked as a private drive, beginning at the county road and terminating at the barn. There was no mention of an easement, no right-of-way, nothing. Next, I asked Marlene for the plat map for the new development, the estates at Willow Creek. It took her a few minutes to find the modern, computer-generated filing. I unrolled the huge sheet of paper on a table. The layout of her development was clear, and as I suspected, it showed its own dedicated access road, a planned street called Vanderbilt Way, that was supposed to snake its way through the development and connect to the main county road about a mile south of my property. It was a longer, more winding route, which is why Karen wanted my shortcut so badly. But here was the smoking gun. On her own official, filed with the county plat map, the border between her property and mine was a solid, unbroken line. There was no easement, no right-of-way, no community access. Her lawsuit was a complete and utter fabrication built on nothing. I spent the next 2 days in that dusty office, meticulously gathering my arsenal. I paid for certified, notarized copies of everything. My original deed, the 1940 survey map, her development's plat map. I had Marlene stamp them with the official county seal. These weren't just papers anymore, they were undeniable, legally binding facts. They were the nails for Karen Bradshaw's coffin. While I was doing this, she escalated her smear campaign. She went to the local news channel. They ran a segment on the evening news. Local developer clashes with rancher over access. They showed her, looking poised and professional, standing in front of her ridiculous fountain. She painted herself as a victim, a small business owner just trying to provide beautiful homes for families, being bullied by a stubborn, old-fashioned rancher who was hoarding public resources and refusing to be a good neighbor. They even used a photo of me, a grainy shot they must have taken from the road where I was squinting into the sun and looked angry. It was the picture of a grumpy old coot. He's blocking an essential access route that has been used for years, she lied, looking directly into the camera with her soulless eyes. It's a matter of public safety and convenience for my residents. We have filed a lawsuit to ensure that this vital community link is reopened. Watching it on the small TV in my kitchen, I felt a surge of cold fury. She was playing the victim on television while actively committing fraud. She was using the media to pressure me, to paint me as the villain in a story where she was the undisputed criminal. Sarah turned off the TV. "Don't let her get to you," she said. "Oh, she's not getting to me," I replied, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. "She's helping me." She was making this a public fight, and when the truth came out, her downfall would be just as public. I now had all the pieces. The fraudulent brochures from Eddie, the certified deeds and surveys from the courthouse, the history of false reports to animal control and the EPA, and now her public, televised lies. The paper war was over. It was time to build. The next morning, I made the call. "Big Mike's Construction," a gravelly voice answered. "Mike, it's Clay Mercer, out at Riverside Ranch." "Clay, how's that old truck of yours running? What can I do for you?" Big Mike was a legend in the county, a massive man who was as honest as the day is long and built things to last forever. He hated HOAs and entitled city folk with a passion that burned as hot as his welding torch. "I need you to build me a wall," I said. There was a pause on the line, then a low chuckle. "A wall? Like a keep the neighbors out kind of wall?" "Like a go to war with the neighbors kind of wall," I clarified. "I need it big, I need it permanent, and I need it built on a specific weekend." I laid out the whole story for him, from the trespassing to the lawsuit to the fraudulent brochures. The more I talked, the more I could hear him getting excited. By the time I finished, he was practically giddy. "Clay, my friend, it would be my profound honor to build this monument to private property rights for you. You tell me when and where." And that's when I laid out the final part of my plan. It was time to stop playing defense. It was time to go on the attack, and my weapon of choice was going to be 12 feet high and made of steel-reinforced concrete. If you're enjoying watching this HOA tyrant dig her own grave, do me a favor and smash that like button. Subscribe if you want to see how this all plays out, because the best part is yet to come. I promise you, the look on her face when the first concrete truck arrived was worth the price of admission all by itself. The consultation with Big Mike was less of a business meeting and more of a council of war. He drove his beat-up Ford F350 dually out to the ranch the next day, the truck groaning under the weight of his toolbox and his own considerable frame. He lumbered out, a toothpick dancing in the corner of his mouth, and surveyed the scene at my front gate. He saw the logging chain, the new sign, the tire tracks in the dirt on the other side where Karen and her lemmings had been forced to turn around. "So this is the front line," he rumbled, a grin spreading across his face. "This is it," I confirmed. "I want to put a stop to this for good. Not a fence she can cut, not a gate she can ram. I want something biblical." We walked the property line, about 100-foot stretch where my road met the county blacktop and bordered her development's sad little patch of grass. I unrolled the survey maps on the hood of his truck. "I want a wall," I said, tracing the line with my finger, "from that old oak tree to this fence post here, right on my property line, not an inch over." Mike squinted, spat the toothpick onto the ground, and nodded. 12 foot high, you said? poured concrete, steel rebar reinforcement. We'll sink the footings 4 feet deep. Even a tank ain't getting through this. We can put in a heavy-duty steel slide gate, industrial grade, the kind they use at prisons. She ain't ramming that with her little German grocery getter. What about permits? I asked. That was my only worry. Already checked after you called, he said, tapping his temple. You're zoned agricultural. This isn't a residential fence. We're filing the permit for an agricultural security barrier. It's for protecting livestock and equipment. It's a different set of codes. As long as it's on your land and not in a designated floodplain, you can build a fortress if you want to. The county won't say boo. He winked. The beauty of being a ranch, my friend. They leave you alone. We talked cost, the concrete, the rebar, the custom-built gate, the labor. The number he came back with was just over $50,000. $52,000 to be exact, he said, scribbling on a notepad. Paid in full, up front. This is a special kind of job. I got to pay my boys extra for the weekend work and the, let's call it, entertainment value. I didn't even blink. I had a special account, a savings fund I'd built up over a decade from the sale of my best Angus bulls. It was my rainy day fund for emergencies like a barn fire or a major drought. This, I decided, qualified as a man-made disaster. That evening, I sat down with Sarah and laid out the invoice. She looked at the number, then looked at me. That's the money for the new tractor, she said quietly. The old one will last another year or two, I replied. This can't wait. This is about the principal. It's about our home. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window toward the glow of the lights from the estates. All right, she said, finally turning back to me. Burn it. Burn it all down, metaphorically, of course. Her support was the final piece I needed. The next day, I transferred the $52,000 to Big Mike's business account. The timing was crucial. Eddie the mailman, my invaluable source of intelligence, had given me the golden ticket. He'd shown me the flyer for Karen's grand opening sales event. It was a 3-day affair, Friday through Sunday. She was planning on having the entire development swarming with potential buyers. She'd have food trucks, balloons, a bouncy house for the kids, the whole dog and pony show. Her ads, running on the local radio, specifically mentioned the serene country setting and the convenient private access. She was banking everything on this weekend. A source Eddie had at the bank mentioned she was behind on her construction loans, and if she didn't close a certain number of sales by the end of the month, the bank was going to pull her financing. This weekend was her Hail Mary, and it was the perfect weekend to build my wall. The concrete trucks arrived at dawn on Friday, not one but 3 of them, roaring down the county road in a convoy, followed by Big Mike's crew in their work trucks and a flatbed carrying a small excavator. The noise was glorious. It was the sound of righteous construction. They set up just inside my property line, and the work began immediately. The excavator dug a deep 4-foot trench along the 100-foot line I had marked. My new property line was a gaping maw in the earth. By 8 a.m., the first signs of life appeared at the estates. A truck delivering balloons, a catering van, then Karen's white BMW. She pulled up to the entrance of her development and stopped dead. I was standing by the gate, drinking a cup of coffee, just watching. She got out of her car, her face a mask of confusion that quickly morphed into outrage. She marched across the road, her heels sinking into the soft shoulder. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, gesturing at the massive trench and the crew of men setting up wooden forms. "Morning, Karen," I said cheerfully, taking a sip of coffee. "Nice day for it." "What are you doing? You can't do this. I have my grand opening this weekend. You are deliberately trying to sabotage my business." "Just a little property improvement," I said calmly. "Building an agricultural security barrier. Got the permit and everything. Don't want my cows wandering out into the road, you know. Safety first." Her face was turning a blotchy red. "You're building a wall." "That's one name for it," I agreed. This is when she played her losing hand. She pulled out her phone and screeched, "I'm calling the police. I'm calling my lawyer. You have an injunction coming. You are blocking a community easement." I just smiled and tapped the brand new even bigger sign I'd had Big Mike plant in concrete that morning. It was 4 feet by 8 feet. Impossible to miss. It read, Private Property, Deed Book 42, page 118, no easement exists. Construction in progress. All trespassers, including legal representatives, will be charged. Not in this county, darling, I said, my voice dropping the cheerful act. Your lawsuit is a fantasy, and you know it. Now, I'd appreciate it if you get back on your side of the line before you fall into my trench. She did call the cops. 2 sheriff's deputies rolled up about an hour later. The first prospective buyers for her open house were just starting to arrive, slowing down to gawk at the massive construction project and the police presence. It was not the welcoming atmosphere she had envisioned. I calmly walked over to the deputies, my binder of documents in hand. Morning, officers, I said. Let me guess. Complaint from the lady across the street? The older deputy sighed. Something about you building a wall in the middle of a public road, Mr. Mercer. I opened the binder. Here's the certified deed from 1940. Here's the original survey map. Here's the plat map for her own development, showing no easement. And here, Steams, I said, handing him the final paper, is my county-approved permit for an agricultural security barrier on my private land. The deputy spent a few minutes looking everything over. He walked the property line stakes, comparing them to the survey. He looked at my permit. He looked at the screaming, gesticulating Karen Bradshaw. He handed the binder back to me. Your paperwork is in order, Mr. Mercer, he said. You're well within your rights. He then walked over to Karen. Their conversation was short. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw him pointing at my sign, then at her development, then back at my sign. I saw him shake his head. I saw her face crumble. The deputies got back in their car and left. They didn't even give her a second look. By noon, the foundation was poured. The rebar cages were set, a skeleton of steel that looked indestructible. The first concrete pour began, the big chute filling the forms with thousands of pounds of wet cement. The noise of the trucks and the vibrators settling the concrete drowned out everything, including Karen's frantic calls to her lawyer. Her open house was a catastrophe. Families would pull up, see the industrial-scale construction, the mud, the noise, the sheer aggressive permanence of what I was doing, and they wouldn't even get out of their cars. They'd just shake their heads and drive away. The bouncy house sat limp and sad. The caterers looked bored. The wall rose over the weekend. By Saturday afternoon, the forms were being stripped away to reveal a sheer, brutalist face of gray concrete. It was 12 feet high, 100 feet long. It was magnificent. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever built. The final, glorious act of her own self-destruction came on Sunday afternoon. The open house had been a complete and utter failure, not a single offer. Her last hope was gone. She had been watching from her sales office all weekend, a storm cloud of impotent rage. I was out by the new wall, admiring Big Mike's handiwork as his crew installed the gate. It was a masterpiece of over-engineering. A 16-foot sliding gate made of quarter-inch steel plate, set on a track that could handle a locomotive. Suddenly, I heard an engine roar to life. It was the BMW. But this wasn't the sound of her leaving. It was the sound of a full-throttle assault. She came tearing out of her development's entrance, tires squealing, and aimed her SUV directly at the new gate. I think in her mind, blinded by fury and desperation, she thought she could smash through it. She probably thought it was a flimsy aluminum thing like the ones at the entrance to a gated community. She was wrong. I had my phone out. I'd set up a new security camera but wanted to capture this myself. It happened in slow motion. The white BMW X5, a $60,000 symbol of her arrogance, hit the immovable steel gate doing about 40 miles an hour. The sound was sickening, a metallic shriek of tearing, crumpling metal. The gate didn't budge, not a millimeter. It vibrated for a second, a low hum, and that was it. The BMW, however, accordioned. The entire front end imploded. The hood buckled up, the engine was shoved back into the firewall, the expensive headlights shattered, the airbags deployed with a violent poof. The car, mortally wounded, came to a dead stop, steam and smoke pouring from its ruined guts. A moment of silence, and then the driver's side door was shoved open. Karen Bradshaw stumbled out, dazed, a trickle of blood on her forehead from where her sunglasses had hit her. She stared at her destroyed vehicle, then at the completely unscathed gate, and then at me. I was standing there, phone still recording, with a completely neutral expression on my face. She let out a scream. It wasn't a scream of anger this time. It was a raw, guttural wail of absolute soul-crushing defeat. She had thrown everything she had at me, her money, her lawyers, her car, and all she had managed to do was destroy herself against the wall I had built. Her life, just like her BMW, was a total wreck. The aftermath of Karen's final desperate act was eerily quiet. The tow truck came and hauled away the carcass of her BMW X5, leaving behind a dark stain of oil and coolant on the pavement and a scattering of broken plastic. The wall stood, silent and immense, a permanent gray monument to her failure. For a few days there was no sign of her. The grand opening balloons wilted and fell. The sales office at the entrance to the estates remained dark. The war of noise and confrontation was over, but my final offensive was just beginning. I had the video of her ramming the gate. It was crystal clear, undeniable proof of her willful destruction of property and reckless conduct. That video was the capstone on the mountain of evidence I had been building. I took my binder, now thicker than a phone book, and made an appointment, not with my lawyer, but with the Tarrant County District Attorney. I sat in a sterile office across from a sharp, no-nonsense assistant DA named Mr. Chen. I didn't editorialize. I just laid it all out chronologically. I started with the trespassing. I showed him the time-stamped photos from my trail cam of her cutting my first lock. I presented the sworn affidavits from the animal control officer and the EPA agent, detailing her pattern of filing false and harassing reports. I showed him the glossy mailers promising exclusive ranch road access. I handed him the certified copies of my deed and her plat map, proving no such access existed. Then I played him the video of the news report where she publicly lied about the easement. And for the grand finale, I put my phone on his desk and played the video of her using her BMW as a battering ram against my gate. Mr. Chen watched the entire presentation without saying a word, his expression growing more and more grim. When the final video ended, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "Mr. Mercer," he said slowly, "this is one of the most comprehensive civilian-compiled cases I've ever seen. This goes well beyond a simple property dispute. This is a pattern of harassment, criminal mischief, and what appears to be multiple counts of felony wire and mail fraud. She sold houses based on a lie," I said simply. "She put that lie in her contracts. I'm sure discovery for her civil suit against me would turn those up." "We won't need to wait for that," Mr. Chen said, a predatory gleam in his eye. "We can subpoena those records directly based on this evidence. She used the U.S. mail to perpetuate a fraudulent scheme. That gets the postal inspectors involved. This is serious. Very serious." While the DA's office began building their criminal case, I launched the second phase of my attack. I hired a local paralegal to look up the public records of every home sold in the estates at Willow Creek. It cost me a few $100s, but it gave me a list of names and addresses. I then drafted a simple, factual letter. It contained no emotion, no anger. It just laid out the facts. It said, "To the residents of the estates at Willow Creek, it has come to my attention that your purchase may have been made under the pretense of a private ranch road access. Please be advised that no such legal easement exists. The road in question is the private property of Riverside Ranch, Deed Book 42, page 118, and is not available for public use. Any claims or contractual clauses guaranteeing such access are fraudulent. For verification, please see the enclosed certified copies of the relevant county deeds and plat maps." I enclosed copies of the same documents I'd given the DA. I sent one of these packets via registered mail to every single homeowner in her development. The fallout was immediate. A storm of civil lawsuits descended upon Karen Bradshaw, one from every family she had deceived. They weren't just suing for the loss of an amenity. They were suing for fraud, for misrepresentation, for the diminished value of their homes now that the quick route to town was permanently blocked by a 12-foot wall of concrete. The final act was set for the Tarrant County Fair and Rodeo, the biggest local event of the year. It's a place of community, a celebration of the agricultural roots of our county. And, in a final, pathetic act of denial, Karen Bradshaw had a booth, a small 10x10 spot in the commercial exhibitor's tent, right between a guy selling tractor attachments and a lady selling homemade jams. She was trying to save face, to pretend she was still a viable real estate professional. She had a pasted-on smile and a few sad-looking brochures for her development, which was now a toxic asset. I knew from a tip from Mr. Chen's office that the arrest warrant was active. They were just waiting for the right moment. I made a few calls of my own, one to my lawyer, asking him to be present, and one to a reporter at the local news station who owed me a favor after I'd given him the exclusive on a prize-winning steer a few years back. I told him to have a camera crew at the exhibitor's tent at 2 p.m. sharp. I got to the fair early. I wasn't there to gloat, just to witness. I bought a lemonade, leaned against a nearby fence post, and watched. People walked past her booth, averting their eyes. The story was all over town now. She was a pariah. She stood there alone, her desperate smile frozen on her face. At exactly 2 p.m., 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies and a plainclothes detective, the same one who had watched my videos, strolled into the tent. They walked calmly and purposefully toward her booth. The news camera materialized, the red light blinking. Karen saw the officers approaching, and for the first time, her mask of composure shattered. The blood drained from her face. The detective didn't raise his voice. He just stopped in front of her table. "Karen Bradshaw?" he asked, though it wasn't a question. She nodded, mute. "Karen Bradshaw, you're under arrest for multiple counts of felony wire fraud, mail fraud, and insurance fraud for the claim on your vehicle." The detective's voice was clear and carried through the suddenly silent tent. The handcuffs clicked. The sound was sharp, final. The cameras flashed. A collective gasp went through the crowd that had gathered. As the deputies began to lead her away, she saw me. Her eyes, wide with shock and humiliation, locked onto mine. There was no anger left in them, just a hollowed-out despair. I didn't smile. I didn't say a word. I just gave a slow, deliberate nod. My lawyer stepped forward and handed a press kit to the reporter. It contained copies of the deed, the survey, the fraudulent mailer, and a statement from me. I just stood there leaning against my wall of justice, built not of concrete, but of truth. And I watched as the woman who tried to ruin my life was led away in disgrace. Her downfall public, absolute, and entirely of her own making. The epilogue wrote itself, really. Karen Bradshaw's world collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. With the evidence I'd provided, the criminal case was a slam dunk. She was convicted on multiple felony counts and ended up with a sentence of 3 years in state prison, plus a hefty restitution order to the homeowners she defrauded. The civil suits bankrupted her completely. The bank foreclosed on the estates at Willow Creek. The half-finished McMansions and empty lots sat like skeletons on the hill for more than a year, a constant reminder of her hubris. Eventually, another, more reputable developer bought the entire parcel for pennies on the dollar. The first thing they did was build the proper winding access road, the one that had been on the plans all along. My life on the Riverside Ranch returned to its natural rhythm. The quiet mornings, the lowing of the cattle, the familiar rumble of my old tractor. The wall is still there, of course, a big gray sentinel at the edge of my property. Sometimes the new neighbors, the ones who bought from the second developer, will stop and ask me about it. I just tell them the truth. I tell them it's an agricultural security barrier, built to protect my livestock. The other night, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch swing, watching the sun set behind the oak trees. The $52,000 was long gone, but it had bought something priceless: peace. The prize heifer, Daisy, was out in the pasture with her calf, both of them healthy and strong. The quiet was absolute. They say good fences make good neighbors. It's a nice sentiment, but it's not always true. Sometimes a good neighbor is impossible. Sometimes the only thing that works is a 12-foot steel-reinforced concrete wall to make a felon. And that is how a $52,000 wall saved my ranch and sent a fraudster to jail. If you love seeing entitled nightmares get a dose of concrete justice, smash that like button. Subscribe for more stories from the ranch. Have you ever had a neighbor from hell? Tell me in the comments.